Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever GXPC podcast. I am your host, Evolve. I am joined today by my co-hosts, Skyson and Hickory. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing wonderful. Really enjoying this. Going to get the chance to get this on the road, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. We have a lot of cool things to look forward to. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the teams that have made it into the Season 4 playoffs. Before we get into everything tonight, we're going to tell you a little bit about our sponsors. First up is the Games XP shop. It is located in Decorah, Iowa. They are a small family-owned business that deals in video, card, and board games. So you guys have seen the ads all season. Go ahead and check them out if you're ever in Decorah, Iowa. They're the place to check out. We also have our new sponsor. It's a video game called The Captives Plot of Demiurge. It's an action-adventure game with real-time combat and a strong focus on story. You can create and play as a collection of prisoners who must work together to defeat the evil schemes of Prince Pico and his newly acquired magical powers. You guys can check that out. It's releasing on Steam on October 11th. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our topics today. So first, we'll start out with the tiebreaker that was played today between Schism and Phoenix Rising. It ended up being Schism taking the victory, locking in that third seed. I know Skyson was able to cast that. Take us through that game a little bit.
That game definitely, I want to say, was a roller coaster of all things. We really saw in the beginning, it looked like DPR was really coming together and was really coming forward to do, they were doing a good job in the beginning. You saw a lot of action coming out of the bot lane, and I talked about it going in. We were looking to see how Tej was going to come in through that bot lane and really come together versus, the new Train Starcast, who have been a pretty consistently strong bot lane. But it really was interesting to see the new players come in, both Tej and No Excuse, coming in for the AD carry and jungle, and they really brought it together through the end. And of course, the sick Baron steal that we saw from Tej's Varus come in absolutely clutched the game for them, I want to say. And really going forward, it was a really nice Schism win for them.
Yeah, so with that, Schism locks in the 3 seed going into playoffs. We also have Phoenix Rising. They're going to fall to that 4 seed. So are there any surprises there? What do you think, Hickory? Did you expect something else out of that matchup, or was it kind of exactly what you thought would happen?
I didn't realize that they had subs until just now. I would have expected it to be a Schism win without subs anyway. Without knowing that there were subs, I actually probably would have expected them to actually lose. So it's pretty nice they pulled out the win. That puts them in 3rd place right now, I think, right? So they finished in 3rd. Unfortunately, that shouldn't change their bracket standings at all, but that might give them a better seed to play into, which can actually be like a really important thing, because at the end of the day, you don't want to run into White Lotus in the second round, really, as anyone. So I think it's just kind of interesting that even up to Tuesday, right before the playoffs, something as can be incredibly important as even just with the best of one that can really change the way that your playoffs end out, just based on who you're going to run into in the first or in the second round.
Yeah, for sure. And, bringing up that, let's take a look at the final standings. So we'll go ahead and go through first, and then we'll talk about any surprises from those standings or any kind of dark horses that you might think going into the playoffs. So finishing with that number 1 seed, we saw White Lotus. They ended 13-0-1 in series play with a total amount of points of 39. Now, are these updated? I don't think these are updated standings.
I think those are missing a couple. 13.
Yeah, because White Lotus lost to Purple Cobras.
We do have the bracket, which might be a little bit more beneficial.
All right, well, I'll just run through the standings, and then we'll take a look at the bracket. So White Lotus took the 1 seed. Purple Cobras the 2 seed. We have Schism taking the 3 seed. Phoenix Rising in the 4 seed. No F's given in the 5 seed. Reign of Kings rounding out the playoffs in that 6 seed. The teams that didn't quite make the playoffs this season were Full Send Gaming, Red Dusk Esports, Atlas Esports, and Furious Gents. So that being said, are there any surprise teams that you thought shouldn't have made the playoffs but did, or rather didn't make the playoffs that you think should have made the playoffs? What do you think, Hickory?
I'm a little bit surprised by Reigning Kings. I mean, they are the 6th seed, so it's kind of the last one to make it in. But I am surprised they kind of were off a little bit. They were one of the replacement teams, right? And I don't think that their first week or two was the most amazing, if I remember. I didn't even look at the standings. But I think it's kind of impressive that they were able to kind of come in and get things going a little bit later on. And I mean, 6th seed is still in the playoffs after all. I mean, there's plenty of times that the 6th seed actually can make it to the finals and win. It's really about getting to the playoffs more than anything. So yeah, I think that they stand out to me, and I'm kind of interested to see how they go up against Schism.
Yeah, definitely. And before the season even started, when I realized that Reign of Kings was coming in, I kind of hyped this team up from the very beginning because I know Ajat, I know how he performs in the team environment, and I know how well they can play. And then they lost their first 3 or 4 series, and I was just like, what's going on here? But now we're kind of starting to see them get up to that potential, honestly. So what about you, Skyson? Do you think there's any teams that you would expect should have made playoffs and just really didn't?
I think I definitely have a lot on this one. I think the weird one here, and this could be an unpopular opinion, I think the weird one here is actually No F's Given. I think that seeing them in playoffs is a big surprise to me. I did not think that they were consistent and stable enough throughout the second series. I think that if you want to make a real case, that I think they may have gotten, a little bit carried through the first half of the season for them. But I think the bigger problem is that Full Send Gaming did not make playoffs, and so much of their shakiness came in the first half of the first part of the second half. They lost, I think, 4 or 5, maybe 6 games in a row, and they didn't really bring it back together until so deep into the second half that they didn't end up making playoffs. But I still think near the end they were a pretty considerably strong team. I just think that they had fallen apart for so long that it didn't, it was really surprising to me that they couldn't get themselves back on their feet to beat some of these teams that they really I think should have beaten. And some of the losses they had were really kind of questionable for me. And No F's Given, I don't think they coasted by. I feel like I don't know. They deserve to be there. I think that I'm surprised to see them not 6th seed, because I think that, Reign of Kings absorbing Impulse's record going into the second half made it a little harder for them. But seeing them in playoffs, I do think they deserve to be there. I think they deserve, 4th or 5th seed, honestly. So seeing NFG above them is interesting. And I think that of all the teams, I think NFG and Full Send were 2 teams who really, throughout the entirety of the season, swapped up their roster a bunch. You just saw several changes come through. And I think that I don't know, I feel like that subtracts a lot of power from a lot of teams. I mean, you look at how it is right now. You see Purple Cobras and White Lotus are the 2 teams at the top, and they have had the same 5 people in their roster from the start of the season. So them going forward versus these teams that keep changing their roster, it's really just putting a lot of disparity on what's happening there. So seeing how it is really is interesting to see, and I think NFG really just kind of pulled it out to come across at the top. And seeing them there is surprising to me, but I'm going to say they deserved it. So that's where they are.
Yeah, did you get ganked by your cat there or something?
Yes, I did, actually.
You
I expect this to happen way more. She walked behind my computer and just crossed in front of the camera, and I can't shove her because then it'll shove them. That's going to happen more than once. That is not the first time you're going to see me disappear, I promise. Anyway.
Yeah. So I'll kind of round out this topic here. So taking a look at the standings, honestly, the top 4 don't really surprise me. We saw Phoenix Rising. They were in the finals last season. Schism, I knew we would be able to bounce back and kind of get in this top 4 threshold. And obviously Purple Cobras and White Lotus have looked strong from the beginning. No F's Given, I think I agree with you there. They kind of shuffled their roster, but I think their consistency was with their 80 carry Arrow. He performed very well this season, which I think really helped bolster No F's Given to get into the playoffs. I think my big surprise this season is just kind of how poor Red Dusk Esports performed this year. They won last year, and they just like really didn't do much this year. So I guess that would be my big surprise there. So that's kind of going through the standings. Do you guys have anything else to add on that?
I was going to mention something on the note of Red Dusk. I really think that Red Dusk suffered a lot of the same way NFG did. And I feel like ever since they lost their AD carry Finesse from the first, I think that happened all the way back in the first round. But I think ever since then, they've kind of subject to shuffling up their roster a bit too much. And I don't think they ever really solidified a roster that, worked out for them. And I mean, you talk about it, you're like, well, they beat White Lotus. And I'm like, oh, okay, they beat White Lotus. They also didn't beat anybody else through the rest of the season. It was really just, I don't know, a strange combination of factors. And I feel like, I don't know, Red Dusk was on pretty shaky ground going into the first round. They were part of the, I think, 4 or 5 way tie of the 5-4 record teams. And just going into round 2, they were not there. And I don't know. I feel like they underperformed. I feel like they didn't perform as well as they could have the first half. So second half going in, I wasn't really surprised they didn't make it. And the White Lotus win, of course, was just the most surprising thing ever. But I still don't think it was really worth anything.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think you're right. It doesn't mean anything, not just from a standings point of view, but also from like, is this our turnaround kind of thing? Because you mentioned a lot of the roster stops, and it always felt like there wasn't necessarily like lacking individual skill in too many cases. Maybe someone would lose their lane every once in a while, but it always seemed like at the second that it got 15 minutes and 20 seconds into the game in almost every Red Dusk Esports game, there just wasn't really like this kind of devoted cause, I feel like. And I think a lot of that has to do with the switch ups, that like they never really, maybe there's an issue with the shot calling or the synergy or something like that, but as soon as it got out of the laning phase, which wasn't always the best, they just weren't able to like basically keep up with the other teams, which is why I think the White Lotus win is kind of it could have meant a lot, but it ended up not, is because White Lotus is a team that can group very well, rotate very, very well, and rapidly. And so, if you look on paper at Red Dusk beating them, it kind of seems like, oh, this is the time that they have, been able to topple one of not only the best teams in the league, but also one of the best teams at team play and rotational play. But clearly, it wasn't enough. It was too late, and it seemed more, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but like a fluke than really anything else.
Yeah. And it really caught, I think you're right. It was kind of like a trap game for White Lotus, and they just fell into that trap and dropped a series that they shouldn't. But with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the playoff bracket. I know Laxon posted it in chat. Nick, is there any way you can post that in chat or bring it up onto our... I'm
sorry, what are we looking for?
So we'll take a look at it. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the brackets going into this here. So we'll start with the quarterfinal matchups. So the first one, we have the 3-seed Schism is going to be playing Reign of Kings, and Phoenix Rising is going to take on No F's Given. So the winner of the Reign of Kings Schism match goes on to face Purple Cobras in the semis, and the winner of Phoenix Rising, No F Givens, is going to go on and head into that match against White Lotus. So interestingly enough, even though Purple Cobras is the 2-seed, I think they're the stronger team going into this playoff run. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this, Hickory?
Whether Purple Cobras or White Lotus is the stronger team?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So I guess what I would feel like that I would put White Lotus as the number 1 seed, and I feel like they're the scariest to run into. But if I could see an issue from them that's, in my opinion, kind of glaring, is that when things go wrong, they go horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. I feel like, and if they're late to a play, if someone just gets like solo killed, or someone just gets caught out, it just becomes this cascading effect that can take like 5 or 10 minutes before they really come back together. And like there's been multiple times, actually in the previous season or series last week, like Thursday, it was Schism, I think. There was like multiple times where White Lotus had like a decent lead, nothing monumental. Like one person would get caught out, and then it would be like 5 minutes before like they were back to the point that they were for just one person getting caught out. When things work out, they're always ahead of the play. They're always really, really fast. They always really know what needs to be done. But it feels like they need to make, it's almost kind of this curse of like being so successful is that you don't really know what happens when you're not being successful. Especially when you start running into Schism and Purple Cobras more and more and more, because you're not playing against, Furious Gents anymore. And it's kind of an interesting thought process when it comes to the best of fives too, because if you screw up the first 2 games in a row, just because of, whatever, bad draft, something kind of, normal, you're all of a sudden, you have to win 3 games in a row perfectly. And if anything goes wrong, like someone getting caught out because they're warding, that could just be it. So that's an interesting point. I still feel like they're stronger, but I am a little bit worried when it comes to someone kind of like throwing a wrench in the works.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have seen in the chat, I think it is actually Dynamic Seed, so it's going to change a little bit, but we'll continue on to this topic of Purple Cobras versus White Lotus. Skyson, who do you think is stronger at the moment and why?
Purple Cobras, no contest, is what I'm going to say here. I think that the important thing here is I believe that the game plan going forward, if you look at the White Lotus you look at the White Lotus crew, I think that the reason that you see these White Lotus like game losses, set losses happen is because more often than not, White Lotus is the type of team to build all of their team into, they put all of their eggs into one basket very often. And it works for them in a lot of their games, to be honest. But the games that, their idea crumbles, it crumbles very quickly. The thing about Purple Cobras is they're a team that consists of multiple threats. They very, very rarely do you see a Purple Cobras comp where they just say, okay, we're going to build tanks around Tomato Farmer and he's going to carry the game. That's the thing. You go into picks and bans. Go into picks and bans against White Lotus, and you're like, we're going to take away, some of the one trick. We're going to take away a Calling Katarina from Fuji because, he plays a crap load of those. We're going to take away something else we don't want to play with. But if you look at Purple Cobra's bans, you say, we have to take away Renekton because Synchro will carry on it. We have to take away Ari because Frischkin can carry on it. It's just a different type of worry that you have about the members of Purple Cobras versus White Lotus, where White Lotus will beat you down as a team, and if you take apart one of their strong links, then the rest of them kind of falls apart. Well, Purple Cobras have consistently come to games where Synchro Gazer can carry, Frischkin can carry, Desolate Earth can carry. They've had games. I've seen games from Purple Cobras where each individual member has just had a completely standout performance, and you can't just give it to one member and say, "Oh, this is how Purple Cobras win." They just went off Synchro. You saw that a lot in the first round. You saw that off Synchro. You saw Synchro Gazer was just tearing up wins. Nobody wanted to be on Renekton. He was just eating people, and that was dumb. But you can't look at that and say, "Oh, Synchro Gazer is the only carry on Purple Cobras." That just wasn't true. And it was proven after people started banning him out, and then you saw Friction come out with mages and just start walking over people. You saw Friction find power on Kane and start running over people, and it just cascaded downwards. So that's why I think Purple Cobras as a team are stronger, because you have so many different avenues of threats to worry about. You can't just pick off one person and say, "Oh, Tomato Farmer's 0-4, Purple Cobras is dead. We win this game." Versus White Lotus, where maybe if Fuji isn't getting the kills he wants, maybe Fuji's 0-2 in lane. Now it's like, oh, well, now Fuji might not carry, so it's gonna be rough, and then you pin down Ethereal. You kind of pinpoint the White Lotus strategies. I feel like they're easier to pick apart than Purple Cobras, and Purple Cobras bring a lot more to the table as a team of threats, and that's why I think that they are a better team of 5 than White Lotus.
All right, well, that kind of clears up that there. Let's just take a look right now at the bracket, and let's talk about who in the quarterfinals do you guys think has the easiest run to the finals. If there's going to be kind of a dark horse in this quarterfinals, who is it going to be, and why do you think that's going to be? We will start with Skyson this time.
I think that if I look at TPR versus... It's TPR versus NFG and Schism versus RK. I think that's I'm gonna leave my personal bias out of this because really, if you ask me on any given day, I just say RK is going to take the whole thing. But I will say that the new Schism roster does look nice, and I do think that Schism RK will be a good match. And I have heard from some intel sources that NFG has done another, more roster switching. NFG and roster switches is an iconic duo at this point, but I believe that they've been seeing some small successes. So I think that both of these quarterfinal matches will be very interesting. I think that there are definitely good things to look out for in both matches, and I think that I can definitely watch TPR and FG matches all day because I love watching those two bot lanes go at it. They'll talk back and forth if they're both the best bot lane in the game, and watching those two fight over it is just great because one of them will just feed and it'll be awesome. But I think that looking forward, I think if you're going to look for an easy out into the finals, I think that you want to look at ROK versus Schism, and I think the winner of that will definitely be the one to carry the momentum forward into the next set, and it'll be very important to see who comes out on top of the game because Schism is looking, they're looking for that rematch, and ROK is, looking to cement the second win over them and say, hey, we've beaten you, we'll beat you again, we're going to go forward. So I think that match is going to be the important one to see who's going to, go to the finals.
Okay. All right, so Hickory, you hear? I guess Skyson is going with Reign of Kings or Schism, kind of whoever wins that match. Who do you think can come out of quarterfinals and make a run?
I'm gonna all in a little bit more on Schism. I think Skyson just mentioned momentum. They had a tough but convincing win against White Lotus a few days ago. And I also kind of liked Skyson's earlier points when we were talking about both White Lotus and Purple Cobras about White Lotus, how you need to kind of pick them apart a little bit. And he might have, changed my mind slightly when it comes to Purple Cobras. But I think if I had to choose, if I was Schism, Reign of Kings, Phoenix Rising, NFG, any of the bottom four teams, I would rather watch a series of White Lotus first, as opposed to be the kind of guinea pig, because the picking part's kind of interesting, but I think a lot of it starts with the draft and kind of continues and more or less ends in the laning phase. And I don't think if you're even a little bit worried about playing them, especially in a best of 5, that you should be unprepared. So I feel like this kind of feels weird that you would want to play White Lotus in the finals. But I think that's the time that you're going to have the absolute most amount of time with information on them, know how to play against them, and know what to do against them. And I think with Purple Cobras, that information is not going to be, not that information is always useful, so I won't qualify, but I think that the information that you would get from watching a series of Purple Cobras will not be as useful as the information you can use against White Lotus. Wow, he's just getting mauled to death by an evil jungle cat right now.
Yeah,
oh my God.
This podcast is just going to be taken over by the cats. They're asking for your cat. Where's your cat? You want to go get your cat? All right. We're going to go get Hickory's cat too. We're really embracing the cat cast right now. But yeah, that'll kind of do it for just kind of going an overall the bracket there. We've kind of got some predictions here. We'll move now into strictly the quarterfinals. I guess we'll wait for Skyson for Hickory to get back. Oh, there it is. There's the other cat. All right. Now we out here. This is good quality production right here. This is what we're looking for.
It's my little baby.
But now that the cats are all here, let's go ahead and move into the next topic. We're just going to focus on quarterfinals right now and players and players to watch in this quarterfinals. So let's start with Reign of Kings and Schism. Who do you think you guys should watch out for in this series? We'll start with you, Hickory.
I feel so uncomfortable when it comes to particular players because I don't feel like I have a strong enough understanding of individual players to comment on this. Yeah, it's just like my totally honest opinion. Okay. I think that I don't feel comfortable enough commenting on particular players, especially as like I focus on play by play. I'm not as intelligent about the game, especially when it comes to like micro lane decisions. So yeah, I don't feel very comfortable when it comes to calling certain people out. I mean, there of course standout players on every single team, but I don't think I can qualify my enjoyment of them as well enough.
Well, then let me kind of rephrase that. What do you want to see out of the two matches?
Okay, I think I can do that. I want to see both. So in the Schism and Reign of Kings match, I want to see extremely clean play from either one of them, because they're going to be playing against the kind of tied for best team no matter what. It doesn't matter if Schism wins or Reign of Kings wins; they're going to play Purple Cobras. So if you cannot come out of that match extremely clean and extremely convincing, momentum is really, really important when it comes to longer series and in a bracket situation. So if they're not coming out of it very, very clean, whoever wins doesn't really matter at this point, Reign of Kings or Schism. If it's really, really close down to the wire, they're just bad words here, random pickoffs there. They miss a Baron smite just for no reason. They still win the game, but they just give up the Baron. That is going to be really, really uncomfortable from an outside perspective when it comes to the Purple Cobras matchup. But in the Phoenix Rising and NFG game, I think that it can actually be a little bit bloodier and a little bit more aggressive. Because as I mentioned earlier, White Lotus is a kind of a team that doesn't do well on the back foot. So if you can already get yourself in the mindset of kind of like from the get-go, just certain body parts to the wall very hard, it might be kind of what you need looking forward in the White Lotus game as well. But I guess I'm still mostly worried about the top side of the bracket more than anything. Or focused on, rather, not worried.
All right. Well, I will move on to Skyson here. Skyson, I'm going to go with the original topic question here. Give me the top 4 players that you are looking forward to seeing in this quarterfinal.
And the quarterfinals across both sets, or four for either.
Both sets. Just top 4 that you're looking forward to looking.
All right. Top 4 players I want to see perform across both these games. You know what? I'll go weird on you. I'll pick one from each team. I want to see Arrow off NFG. I want to see him finally pop off. I want to see him finally have a support in his lane that really suits his playstyle and really works with him. I think if he can get a support that will work with him, I think undoubtedly, and you can mark my words on this podcast, I think he will show up as the best AD carry in this league. Moving next, from Phoenix Rising, I want to see a good performance from Kaze. I actually want to see him show up in this mid lane. I really think he's had lots of fights and lots of matches that Kaze has really been, sort of the make or break of this TPR team. I know you talk a lot about Nutrinks. You talk a lot about the Nutrinks Darkest bot lane, and they're very important. They're integral to the TPR core. But I think Kaze's performance in the mid lane, more often than not, will absolutely make or break TPR games. And I want to see him show up. He's the player on TPR I have my eye on. Looking at Schism, I want to see more from Stevenator. Stevenator, I think, has a very interesting champion pool in the mid lane. We've seen a lot of him. We've seen the Zillion, we've seen the Galio, we've seen the utility picks, we've seen the Aurelia, we've seen the Akali, we've seen him carry, we've seen him protect and attack. Now I want to see him carry. I want to see Stevenator show up absolutely from Schism. And on the side, who does that leave? Reign of Kings. Reign of Kings, I want to see more from Viator, honestly, the top laner. Mm-hmm. I think the Viator's, I don't think he's coasted by, but I think he's tried a little bit to make some picks work for him and hasn't really gotten to flourish along the top lane. I think Unique and Ajat have stolen the show for so long on Reign of Kings that Viator really doesn't have room to shine. And top lane is a place that I think is going to be a very interesting fight between these 6 players. So seeing Viator shine in this top lane will be something I'm looking for with Reign of Kings. So those are my 4 picks.
All right. Awesome. I'll just kind of round it out what I'm looking for. As far as from Reign of Kings, I think Ajat kind of just controls that game so well. When he's there, they perform just totally different. So I think Ajat is a player to look out for Reign of Kings. Schism, even though they're my team, I'm not really sure right now because the roster just changed. We have a little bit more dynamic stuff going on. So I just want to basically keep an eye out on the two new players and see how they do. We have the NFG. I think I agree. It's Arrow. Arrow has the capability of just straight up taking over games if his team allows him to and puts him in position. So I think that's the player I want to look out. And then for Phoenix Rising, that's really tough for me, honestly, because I think they play they're such like a team oriented team, if that makes sense. There's not really like a standout carry for them. They do really well when like Canadian Champ engages nice fights, and they do a good job of peeling for Neutronix, and Kaze gets in there and blows some people up. So I don't really know. I guess I would go with Neutrix, but like I said, I think they just have a really good like team fighting style there. So that is going to do it for players to watch. All right, guys. Now we are kind of towards the end of the podcast here. Let's go with our quarterfinal predictions. Remember, this is best of 5 series. So we will start with the Schism Reign of Kings series. And Hickory, who do you think is going to win, and what is your game count?
Yeah. I think I might have hinted this kind of earlier. I think Schism is going to win, and move on to the semifinals against Purple Cobras. I said that when you kind of got me the way out with the players to watch, I said that I wanted Schism and Reign of Kings to be really clean. I'm not sure it's going to be terribly clean. I want it to be like a 3-0. That would make me very, very comfortable when it comes to the Purple Cobras match, and then in my kind of dark horse feeling. But it's probably going to be more like a 3-1 or a 3-2. I think that the difference between the 3rd seed and even really the 7th or 8th seed, but obviously not in the playoffs, but the 3rd seed and the 6th seed is kind of small. I think White Lotus and Purple Cobras are so far stand out that it's kind of a toss up between anyone, and kind of a scary toss up too for the players. Yeah, so I think it's I want to say a 3-2.
So 3-2 in favor of Schism. Is that your prediction?
Yeah.
All right, Skyson, what do you think?
I got much less to say about it. I'm going to say 3-0 Reign of Kings. Ajad is the best jungler in the league. That's all I got.
Ooh, all right, 3-0 Reign of Kings. I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as that. I think it's going to be a 3-2 in either favor. I just don't know enough about my team to give them the win, so I'm going to predict 3-2 in favor of Reign of Kings in that first matchup there. So that is the first one. We have 2 in favor of the Reign of Kings, and then Hickory picked Schism to move on here. Let's move on to the second match of the quarterfinals. We have Phoenix Rising and No F Given. I think I'm going to go ahead and start with this. I honestly think No F Given just blow them out this series. I know they have had a lot of changes to their rosters, but with all those changes, they've still been very, very competitive. I think they put it all together in playoffs. I'm going to say 3-1 in favor of No F Given. So we'll go on to Skyson. What are your thoughts?
This one's tough. I love both of these teams. I've been following Team Phoenix Rising. They're my homies, and Arrow is one of my favorite players to watch in this league. NFG has shuffled up their roster so many times, and TPR has been, a tight 5 throughout most of all the second half at the very least. But I think the problem is that looking at TPR is a team that crumbles. So I think in my brain, I see a 3-0. I think that the problem is it either has to be a 3-0 for TPR, but as soon as NFG cracks a game, they'll take the set. So I think that I can see a 3-1. I'm actually going to agree with you. I'm going to say a 3-1 for NFG. I think TPR will either take game 1 or game 2. NFG will crack a game, and then they'll run with the set. So I'm going to say 3-1 to NFG.
All right, so we're both 3-1 in favor of NFG. Hickory, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
I mean, I'm kind of wanting to see this proclaimed Arrow pop off. Now that I've it's been kind of put in my head, I kind of like this thought of that, and I like the side of that. I feel like I've seen him so close so many times. He's gotten resources and just not gotten there. So I would like to see it all kind of click. And if it does click, it would have to be a 3-1 or even a 3-0. I mean, like the things that he's done with even being behind is kind of insane. I don't know if I call him the best. Top 2, easy. Top 3, maybe. I think there's some other scary ADCs in the league. But yeah, if he gives even just a little bit of resources and everything going right, it's going to be kind of a wash for Phoenix, I feel like.
All right. So what is your prediction?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I kind of washed over it. 3-1.
3-1 in favor of NFG.
Yeah.
All right. So we have unanimous votes there. 3-1 in favor of NFG in that second match there. So yeah, that is going to do it with all of our segments. The last bit, we are going to open up for some Q&A here. So if you guys want to put some questions in the chat for a particular person, we'll pick around 5 or 6 of those. We'll answer them, and then we will finalize the cast here. So Twitch chat, it is now your time. Pick somebody, and then we'll kind of rock and roll with that there.
I think they want to rehear Skyson's top 5 players to watch.
Now is that... Let's open that up to the entire playoffs instead of just.
Yeah, I was gonna say my top 5, like my top 1 per team, is definitely different from my top 5 players to watch overall in this playoffs. And I think if we're looking at the entirety of playoffs, I think my top 5 to watch. And I mean, I'm as biased of a support main as you're gonna hear me say. So most of these are gonna be bot lane picks, to be fair. But so don't take my word as what I think the other 2 should say or would say. But Arrow, and these are no particular order. These 5, no particular order, because I don't have time in my head to sort these in order. Arrow, I absolutely watch him. I want to see him pop off. I want to see him go crazy. Unique, I think watching him in the lane is going to be insane. I think if he gets pulled off his comfort picks, it'll be important. Watching him is going to be nuts. Let me think. Go to Cinco Gazer. Top lane, I think watching him is going to be super important for a lot of these Purple Cobra games. I love watching him in the top lane. I think shaking up a lot of the top lane picks and meta is going to be really interesting for him. For Ajat, I think in the jungle, definitely going to be super. I could watch him gank at level 2 every single game of this series, and everyone's just going to get thrown for a loop by it. It's going to be nuts. And 5, Darkest. I think watching how Darkest handles the bot lane with new Trinks going forward in the TPR games is going to be incredibly important. And I think she is going to either show that she is a star support in this league to hold new Trinks high, or may end up being the downfall of TPR. So those are my top 5. And if I recall that is Arrow, Darkest, Ajat, Unique, and Cinco Gazer.
All right. I'll kind of do an adaptation of that question a little bit. I think I'm going to go with top player to watch in each role. So I'm going to start with the top lane, and I'm going to give that over to Freshburger.
I would definitely agree with that.
I just think, okay, so Cinco Gazer is very good. I'm not taking anything away from Cinco Gazer, but seeing Freshburger play, he plays more champions, and I think he plays more styles well. Whereas Cinco Gazer has a couple of really good champions and good styles. I think Burger is just a little bit more dynamic, and I think he's the player to watch in the top lane. Moving into the jungle, I think I'm going to stick with Ajat. Like I said, I've hyped Ajat from the beginning of the year. As soon as I knew they were coming into this league, I thought they were going to be like very good, and we're starting to see them kind of come together as a team. And I think Ajat is really the big part of that team. So I'm going to give it to Ajat. In the mid lane, I think I'm going to stick with Fuji from the side of White Lotus. I've seen there's just so many games where I've seen Fuji be able to just take over games and just win off of it. And and I'm going to stick with Etheric for White Lotus in the 80 carry role. Arrow's a close second, but I think Etheric's team puts him in a spot to carry, whereas it feels like Arrow's playing his heart out but not getting all the support that he needs. So I think Etheric's pretty good there. And then support-wise, I think I'm going to give it to my boy Backpack. I mean, he hasn't performed the best all the time, but I think he's finally in a good spot with a good champion, a good partner. I think he's going to perform pretty well in these playoffs. So that's my top 5, like, for position. Any disagrees there from either of you guys?
I definitely want to resound the Freshburger one, especially when it comes to the comparison to Syncrogazer, because I feel like when I've seen Syncrogazer pop off, it's usually a solo kill or 2 in the early game, or a gank or 2 in the early game, and then it just becomes this unbelievable snowball that I don't want to mean that it's like any undeserved at all. I mean, like, when he's given a little bit of resources, the dude's just disgusting. He does so much work with just very small amount of resources. I think the only reason that I see Freshburger as just slightly above is that I've seen Freshburger do maybe not as much of a massive carry performance, but similarly important performances, especially when you look at his tank plays, with equal or less resources. And then that's what I find kind of interesting, is that I've seen, like Orn games, which is, can be, a massive importance in a team game, or just kind of nobody, where he doesn't really seem to get many ganks, doesn't really seem to get a lot of rotations around him, and then all of a sudden he's just kind of been quietly farming, quietly pushing out his waves, quietly chunking down the tower, and then is just always in position for, like, a Forge God call, into the 5-man team, and then the game just breaks wide open all of a sudden. Whereas I feel like with Syncrogazer, you can kind of see what's going to be happening. Early in the game, you're like, okay, I can tell that this guy's going to take over. But I feel like with Freshburger, it's less obvious, and that kind of, oddly enough, kind of just sets him apart just slightly more for me. Yeah, right. That's the only one.
I think going back, and I think that from what you said to what I said, I think that I agree with almost all of your picks. If I was going for a maybe best player in the lane, I think that the disparity between who I want to watch, or who I have to watch out for, and the best player in the lane, just sort of disparities. I do agree completely that I think Freshburger is probably the best top laner in this league. I will definitely agree with that. He is definitely the most consistent as doing his job in top lane. And you will definitely see more White Lotus games where Freshburger is performing in the top lane as a top laner, like doing what he's supposed to, filling his role, absolutely doing everything he needs to for his team. And I think that the difference between why I didn't have any White Lotus members on my, picks to watch for the game is I think that watching all of the White Lotus core as a team, watching all of them, perform together. And I talked about it back when I talked about why I picked Purple Cobras over White Lotus, why I thought they were the number one team. As I think that Purple Cobras has more players, you watch out for sort of a breakout performance to come from one of them, versus White Lotus, that you sort of see these White Lotus wins where they'll just sort of overwhelm the enemy. And I think that it's interesting to see. So it's like my top 5 players would just have like all of White Lotus as one player, because I think that it's more common that you see White Lotus as a whole just sort of swamp over other teams, and that's sort of how they get a lot of their wins, and how a lot of White Lotus games end up going in their favor. So I think that while I do agree that White Lotus that Freshburger is the best top laner in this league, I believe Fuji is the most consistent mid laner in this league, and I do believe Etheric is the best AD carry in this league. All 3 of them together, I believe, are good to watch as a whole, doing their job, absolutely owning their lanes, and, pushing towards the White Lotus win. And I think that was the disparity between what you had said and what I had said, to make sure I clarified my point, that I do not think that, I would never knock down the White Lotus players. They've earned their spot at the top. They absolutely have performed time and time again, and they are absolutely great players. So I definitely agree with the position of putting them, at the top of their rank in their lanes.
All right. Well, we will move on to another question here. Let's see here. Best player overall that did not make playoffs. We'll start with Skyson. Who do you think was the best player in the league that wasn't on one of the playoff teams?
I feel like I could craft like an all-stars team of players from each role. that didn't make playoffs. But I think the top two in my head that stick out, that stick out pretty far as players who maybe got, snubbed, you'll say, and didn't make it in. I think that the one that sticks out in probably anyone's head, if you just, without even looking, is Left Hook Larry. I think that he absolutely has been an incredible jungler that performed super well for Full Send Gaming, and he was pivotal in the first half of the first round. He was pivotal of almost every one of Full Send Gaming's wins throughout the beginning into the middle. He was the center of all the comps they built around. He got things rolling in the beginning, and he was absolutely a player that I was looking out for in just every FSG performance. So he is definitely a major one. I think that there are notable shout-outs there. I think to Destiny ATL on Atlas Esports. I think he was an incredible support player. And I think that so many of the games, and I really give it to Atlas. I think that they never got an AD carry that shined. And I think that bot lane in general was a role that was very difficult to come into in this league, because so many strong bot lanes in this league and so many wins coming from bot lanes. It was really hard to be an AD carry of the same caliber. And I think Destiny was a support of the same caliber, but I don't think that any AD carries that came through with Atlas were able to come up to that level, and I think that's where they maybe have lost. So Destiny, Left Hook Larry, and I'm going to give another shout out to I Smell a Pig, the jungler of Red Dusk Esports, who I also think is a very incredible player. I think that both of the I Smell a Pig was very responsible for a lot of Red Dust, and him and KT and Mid made an incredible mid jungle duo that performed super well throughout most of their series. So I think those three players are probably my top three, and if I had to pick one on top of the others, I would definitely say Left Hook Larry.
Okay. Left Hook Larry. That's what we got from Skyson. I know, Hickory, this might not be a question that you're comfortable answering, but do you have any input on this topic? Who's the best player that didn't make playoffs?
Yes, but I can't remember his name. The reason I can't remember his name is because I don't think he's on the team anymore. But there was a absolutely unbelievable Thresh kind of blitzcrank player at the first half of the season.
Phoenix DC.
Who?
Phoenix DC on Full Send.
That doesn't sound familiar. Maybe.
Do you know what team they played on?
He's the only one I can think of.
All I remember is he got subbed off within like 3 weeks, even though he was just like an insane support player. I remember we even interviewed him a couple times. We gave him the MVP at least once, maybe twice. And I was randomly looking through the roster changes one day, and I saw that they had just dropped him. And I can't remember who it is. I don't know if he got picked up by another team, but it was unbelievable. I unfortunately the team around him, I can't remember it being unbelievable, but if that sentence was off cooldown, he hit a hook every single time. I mean, it was unbelievable. I don't remember if he was on Impulse or not. That doesn't sound right. I'm gonna have to see if I can find it in some logs. This is pretty old though. If I could remember this name, that would help. But there's one particular support that I'm thinking of, and it's not coming up at all.
All right, so one random support. That's what we're gonna roll with.
It might be Jays for Penguin. No, maybe.
All right. Well, maybe. Let's see. I think we have time for one more question. What problems did the teams that did not make playoffs face? I think we kind of alluded to this in the beginning of it. We particularly talked about Red Dusk Esports and Full Send Gaming. So I guess we can reiterate on that just a little bit. I think we talked about just the lack of roster stability, and then, I mean, what other things do you guys think about those teams? Let's kind of focus in on, let's say Furious Gents, Full Send Gaming, and Red Dust, because Atlas came in, they were really behind the 8 ball. They took over a 0-10 record or something crazy.
They took over a 0-9 record.
0-9, yeah. So what challenges do you think the teams that didn't make playoffs really faced?
I think that the most consistent thing between all 4 of the teams that didn't make playoffs is you'll notice the immense amount of roster changes that happened. And I think that the problem with changing up your rosters is no matter, even if you find good players, that you constantly are switching out your players between weeks, you don't have that team communication. I mean, that's so crucial, and it's shown so clearly now that, I mean, you have Phoenix Rising, Purple Cobras, White Lotus in the top 4 of teams, and those teams have, I mean, White Lotus and Purple Cobras have basically been together from the start. Team Phoenix has been, together as their current 5 since like week 4. So you see the consistency, and I mean, it's not all teams. Of course, Schism has had their roster changes. NFG has been changing up all season, so it's not 100% that no roster changes equals good teams. But I think that there's the teams that fell off in general, like as a general note, without going into specifics, I think that just too many roster changes without solidifying that camaraderie and that ability to really band together as a team just sort of hurt the communication of those bottom teams and really didn't get them to a point where they're making wins. Because, I mean, you would see some breakout wins. You saw Furious Gents beat Red Dusk. You saw Atlas beat Red Dusk. And, I mean, at that point, it was sort of beating up on Red Dusk, who at that point, I think Red Dusk sort of had the issue that they were moving around a couple of their players to different roles as well. And some of them had, champion pools that were slightly easier to pinch than others. So picking apart those players really, put them on the back end. So Red Dusk had that issue. Full Send, of course, after losing, some of their really strong players. I don't know. Full Send, I talked about it earlier when we talked about teams that I think should have made playoffs. I think Full Send absolutely should have made playoffs. I think Aslan Man was a great mid laner. I think that the support that they brought in, whose name is eluding me right now, and knows a longer name that I'm really trying to remember. I apologize to Full Send Gaming members. He was a very good support that he came in. And I think that the Full Send roster looked like a roster that could have made playoffs, but I think that you just saw it in the communication that, plays weren't coming together the way they wanted to, and things were just not, they weren't clicking for the team. And they came online in the last 2 or 3 weeks for that team. They were definitely, they were making plays. They won games. And it just came online a little too late. And as for Atlas, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, I would agree with that. It's just them. They put it together. It was just too late, honestly. Right. They took too much time to put it together.
Yeah. Atlas, unfortunately, I think just, they fell into that 09 hole. And I mean, they're at the point they had to beat everyone. And I mean, it was beat everyone or, come in. And then they were coming in as a fresh team. And I think that just the individual players may have been outclassed a little bit, which, that'll happen. I mean, I think that they had great players. They had, the ability to coordinate as a team. And I think that they just kind of got outmatched. They had to play White Lotus, I think, like week 2. So, I mean, it was just, hey, this team that's kind of come together, is working things out. You're going to play the best team in the league at the time. And, they got stomped. I don't think they got stomped. I think they actually brought that game pretty close. I have to go back and check. But regardless, Atlas just kind of was in an already pretty bad hole. Furious Gents, I think, just had, an issue that they were subbing around players. They were messing around with players. Nothing was really coming together for them. Songless has always been, if I go back and players that I think could have made playoffs, I knew I was forgetting one. Songless is definitely a great player.
Yeah, I would agree. Songless played really
I would have
well
liked to have seen Songless, find himself on a team or something like that. He's a great player. And I think that he just had the problem of, I think he was kind of the arrow of Furious Gents. I think with many roster changes, they shuffled around. I don't think they really found a standout carry player to come with them. And it was really just Songless carried the game or they kind of fell apart. And that just kind of what happened to them. So,
all right. Well, bring us on home, Hickory. What do you think the teams that didn't make the playoffs lacked?
I kind of got a tangent from that, specifically because Skyson made me think about it. Is that so? This is my first season being here. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I just don't know any. That I'm not used to the history and stuff like that. But I think the thing that was the most jarring to me, honestly, was actually the amount of roster changes that I witnessed and read through. And I understand that, this is obviously an amateur league. People can't make the schedule all the time and things like that. And that's completely understandable. But I think the thing that I found the most surprising was especially the roster changes of just like, we're just dropping this dude and he'll end up on another team and it's fine, because it was surprising to me because you're never ever going to have the 5 best players, and at the very, really just ever at any level, amateur level and professional level, the chances of you having the 5 best are so low, and then also on a game to game basis, there's just no way that everyone's just going to hard smash their role every single game. So I think the thing that I found the most interesting is that it seemed, again, obviously there are people that. Obviously, swaps had to happen, because of like personal issues and timing issues. But I feel like there is a lot of, or are a lack of trust in the process, in that, or in the understanding that like things move extremely fast, so it feels like you got to fix it. At the first week that you get to 0-2, you got to fix it instantly. But the more that you play together, the more that you practice together, the more chances you'll have to fix the issues, as opposed to like just an individual like, oh, I'm 30 CS down, and that's the reason we're losing. Which could be the reason, could not be the reason. And I feel like the more time that you give a roster to grow, the more chances the roster has to actually succeed outside of the individual players on the roster. This is kind of tangent I came up with.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. So that is going to wrap up this first podcast, episode 1, Road to the Playoffs. Thank you, Hickory and Tyson. Thank you guys so much for coming on, helping me out with this. It was a lot of fun. We had some surprise guests from all 3 of the cats. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in as well and coming out and watching us. We are going to start having our podcast come out every Monday. We're going to get consistent about this. So yeah, that's about it. My name was Evolve. We had my co-hosts Hickory and Skyson. We had Nick in the background doing all the production stuff. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys next week.